My wife has come to understand that over the many years. I understood that she really had come a long way in supporting my love of sports when she started watching games with me and occasionally even putting down her magazine.
Sportscaster Mike Greenberg today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Well, in the popular TV sitcom Everybody Loves Raymond, the character Ray Barone is a popular sports writer. Very well-known, very successful, but at home his wife thinks he's an idiot. Now, let's change the channel back to real life. Mike Greenberg is a very popular, very successful TV sportscaster. But according to his 2006 book, his wife thinks he's an idiot. In fact, he called his book, Why My Wife Thinks I'm an Idiot. And it was his first book, but it was also one of his most popular. Perhaps because it's not just a sports book, it's about the challenges of being a spouse and a parent. As one review at the time noted, Greenberg's is a book about a man who's trying to grow up before his children do. Now, he and I had a great time when we talked about his book in the spring of 2006. In just a moment, our conversation.
They say what's old is new again. You're about to see if that's true as you listen to an interview from noted radio personality Bill Thompson's 30-year archive. Enjoy.
So here now, from 2006, Mike Greenberg.
Your wife doesn't really think you're an idiot, does she?
My wife definitively thinks I'm an idiot. In fact, I think it probably would extend beyond thinking to the area where she knows I'm an idiot. And in fact, don't take this personally, but she thinks you're an idiot too. That's the entire point of the book. Your wife thinks you're an idiot, my wife thinks I'm an idiot, and our wives think that the others of us are idiots. And that's just a gender thing. It's just the way it has always been and the way it will always be.
Well, even in her better moments, my wife, I think, tends to think I'm a lovable nincompoop. But that's pretty close to being an idiot.
Well, one man's lovable nincompoop is another man's idiot. Ultimately, there is never a week that has gone by, no matter how long you've been together, where she has not at some point looked at you and thought to herself, I just have no idea what goes on in that man's head. And that's really the emotion I'm talking about.
Is it not that nature of mankind that drives us to do what we do?
Perhaps. I think that men feel in many ways the same way about their wives. It's just the difference is in the way that it manifests itself. The sentence in the book that I'm most proud of is when I said that generally my view of being a husband stems from the following sentence. You can say to your wife, your need to discuss our problems is interfering with my need to pretend they do not exist. And I think ultimately that's where the disconnect comes from. And so they think we're idiots, and we just would like 10 minutes of quiet to watch the ball game.
Why is a ball game best enjoyed not necessarily in solitude or necessarily in deep silence, but at least you can't have a conversation while the bases are loaded, can you?
You can't have a conversation about anything else. Sports are meant to be watched by people, by large numbers of people, but all of those people have to be watching.
That's right.
They cannot be watched by two people when one of them is doing something else and thus wants to discuss something else. My wife has come to understand that over the many years that we've been together. And as I write in the book, I understood that she really had come a long way in supporting my love of sports when she started watching games with me and occasionally even putting down her magazine.
Have you ever seen, I've witnessed this, I did not think this was actually possible, for couples to have non-sports related discussions at the ballpark while they're sitting in good seats.
No, I don't allow that. I'm a true sports fan. We make fun in my circles of the guy sitting in the good seat on his cell phone waving to the camera, telling his buddies, look, when he throws the pitch, that's me sitting behind home plate. I don't have conversations about other things while sporting events are going on, and I frown upon those who do.
Is this the career that you had dreamed of?
Yes. Actually, it's funny. When I first got out of college, my feeling was that I would try and get into broadcasting because it was something that I was interested in, but I would do it just to pay the bills while I wrote the great American novel. And strike one, strike two on the novels, this came along and has worked out much better for me. But so broadcasting has paid the bills and done so well, but this is definitely what I always wanted. I remember, and my mother will tell this story if you should ever ask her. When I was 8 years old in third grade, I used to write stories and bring them into school, and I would get up in front of my class and read them. And that should give you an indication of A, just what a complete geek I was as a child, and B, of the fact that I've always liked to write, and I've always liked to write stories, and it's always something I've done in my spare time. And, the fact that it has now actually become a book is... I would say it is the thrill of my professional life, and I would say I consider it my greatest accomplishment.
Well, I've long thought and honestly believed I have maybe the best job because I get to meet the most famous people in the world, have them all to myself. I can ask them anything I want. I get their books for free. But I think your job is probably better than mine.
I'm extremely lucky because, I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of how hard I've worked to be in the position I'm in. But I also know that you can't make it in a business like broadcasting, and you can't make it in publishing without a lot of luck. And I think back on my career, I've been in the broadcasting business for 17 years. The number of just fluky, freaky, lucky things that have happened. Going back to, I remember one time a guy had a job I wanted, and he somehow learned how to log into the computer system as our boss, and he got caught because he forgot who he was logged in as, and he sent messages to people, and that's how it ultimately got traced back to him, and that's how I got a promotion. These are the kinds of things that someone was looking out for you, and in my life, look, I'm blessed. I have two beautiful, wonderful, healthy kids, which is the most important thing. I'm married to a woman who I married so far over my head, it's ludicrous. And I have not one but two really nice careers going. So I'm the luckiest person I know.
You have a great chapter in here, or part of a chapter on the hazards of being kind of famous. You're not like Tom Hanks famous, but you're not like bus driver not famous. You're just like you're like a little famous. A
little famous. Actually, what I wrote in the book is that I think a little famous is the best kind of famous to be, and here's how I would describe that. If you're a little famous, you can get a table in a crowded restaurant. If you're very famous, you can't go to that restaurant because people will bother you. If you're not at all famous, they won't let you in the restaurant because they're afraid you'll bother the famous people. So being a little famous is the perfect amount of famous to be. And I also have some stories in there. Early in my career, I traveled with some very famous people and covered them, including Michael Jordan at a time when I think he may have been the most famous person in the world. He was certainly among them. And I can tell you that for all his money and all his brilliance as a basketball player and otherwise, and all of the idolatry that he received and receives, I would not trade places with him. I would not trade lives with him. If you could, and Bo Jackson also, he described it in the book as if walking a mile in his shoes. I have walked a mile close behind them and watched what it's like to be in their shoes. And it might be fun to do for a week, but it's not the way I'd want to live my life.
Their fame has turned them into hermits. I years ago talked to Willie Mays when he wrote his autobiography, and he said he couldn't leave the house without people mobbing him.
And I think it's only gotten worse in this era of mass media, and there's so much more media. There's so much more interest in the private lives of famous people than I think there was in the days when Willie Mays was at the height of, or the pinnacle of his fame. Not that he's not still revered, but the reality is that among the set that is most prone, I think, to mob celebrities, which is young people, sadly, most of them probably don't even know who Willie Mays is. A lot of them in this day and age may not even know who Michael Jordan is, which I find ludicrous and makes me feel very, very old. But that set has moved on to newer, fresher, younger, more famous people.
After this short break, Mike Greenberg tells what it feels like to realize you're getting older.
If you've ever wondered where to find the captivating books we discuss on Now I've Heard Everything, wonder no more.
Just tap the link in our show notes or visit our website, heardeverything.com.
Plus, when you purchase through our affiliate links, you're not only diving into great stories, but also supporting this podcast.
And we thank you for your support.
Now back to my 2006 conversation with Mike Greenberg.
You do let your old foginess slip a little bit when you're talking here about the music that you hear today that just bears some resemblance to music as we know it.
If any
If
whatsoever. And what made me feel like an old fogey is not so much that I don't get the music, but that I find myself using the same words to describe it that my father used to use when I was growing up listening to music. And I realized this is just, life is a cycle, and it's interesting because when you go from one phase to another, I feel like there should be some more clear delineation. Like, you should wake up one morning and someone should say to you, you're now entering a new era in your life. But that doesn't happen. It happens very gradually. And you can see it in your children as well. For example, my kids, who are still very young, they're 5 and 3, they used to love The Wiggles. We love The Wiggles, which is a children's television show, for those who don't know. And they're very popular. We've seen them in concert many times. And we love them. And I sit and watch The Wiggles with my kids, and I've loved them. And I've loved the experience of being a Wiggles fan with my kids. And recently we went on a vacation with the kids, and they were each allowed to bring 3 DVDs on the trip, and neither of them selected a Wiggles DVD. They've moved on to something else. They've gotten a little too old for that and gone on to the new thing. And I was wistful at when I saw them picking them, and I realized that there are no Wiggles DVDs, because that's a phase you don't go back to, and you don't go back to any phases in your life, And so there is certainly a lot of that. The book is sort of about the journey from being a young man who feels much more like a boy than a man to being still a young man, but one who feels like a man. In my own life, in my own mind, I feel like I've grown up a lot in the last 5 or 6 years, which is the space of time that the book covers. And I think becoming a dad has everything to do with that. And that's what it's about. And so certainly feeling older or feeling more mature is a big part of it.
Well, they tell novelists that the main character, has to be different on the last page of the book than he is on the first page of the book. So if you had aspired to write the Great American Novel, you got a good start over here, right here.
Yeah, if it had been the Great American Novel, I could have made up a lot more interesting things, I suppose, to have happened in my life. But no, there's no question that the book is my journey. The book is what it was like to be, a guy starting out in the broadcasting business and very young and married and not having any kids, through a guy who has been in it for a little while and has had some success and now has kids, and the way your life changes. And the book is really meant to be, more than anything else, a tribute to dads of my generation, because we're very different from dads of my dad's generation. My father, who is a great father and is remains as close to me as anyone in the world. But, in his day, he set aside one day on the weekends that we were together. That was our time. And he went out and made a great living. And my brother and I never wanted for anything. And he had done his job. But in this day and age, that's not what I consider to be my job. I'm much more involved in my kids' lives on a day-to-day basis. And so are all the dads that I know. And most of the people that I hang with socially are dads of my generation.
I have difficulty picturing our dads bullying a librarian to let them into the women's room to change a diaper.
Yeah, that's a day I'll never forget. Is when I discovered, to my horror, that the public library in the town where I live did not have a baby changing station in the men's locker room, or the men's bathroom, restroom, and they would not allow me to go into the ladies' restroom. And I desperately needed to take my baby somewhere.
For reasons that are obvious to any parent of a child.
And that were obvious to anyone who was unfortunate enough to be standing near us at the time. And so probably the one really courageous moment of my life, I knocked on the door to the ladies' room, and there was no response, and I just went in. And I changed my daughter, and I thought I was getting away with the crime of the century. And then I discovered, much to my horror, when I came out, that there was a policeman standing outside the door. And he did not arrest me, to his everlasting credit. But I'm still proud of that.
Is it because you're a little bit famous?
I don't think so. I don't think he would have arrested me anyway. He did recognize me, but I don't think he was going to arrest me unless I had been really belligerent. I don't know I'm not exactly sure what the crime is. I mean, it's a crime. I assume trespassing on a women's bathroom is a crime of some sort. But I would do it again. I would do that again. And there should be a baby changing station in a gender neutral place. If it's not, it doesn't have to be in the bathroom, I don't suppose, but there should be one in a place that men are allowed also.
The other thing, I don't remember seeing my dad ever change my little brother's diaper. Never.
No, my father will proudly tell you he never changed a diaper in his life. And in fact, when my daughter was first born, my dad was up visiting, and I recall I said, I'm going to take the baby upstairs and change her. My father grabbed me by the arm and said, "You're going to do what?" And he wasn't so much disapproving as he was just in a state of shock. That's just not something that would ever have entered his mind to do. But you know what, my father wasn't in the room when I was born, and I was holding my wife's leg when my daughter and then my son was born. Although I almost missed the birth of my son because I was on a cell phone in the delivery room because our septic tank had failed that day, and I was on the phone with the plumber getting an estimate on what it was going to cost to replace it. When I heard the doctor say, "One more push and it's here," and I said, "What?" and I got off the phone quite quickly. But things have changed. The role of being a dad has definitively changed over the years, and I would assume it is going to continue to change. When my son Stephen is a dad himself someday, I would assume that his responsibilities and obligations will be different from mine.
Did becoming a father change your definition of success?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know if it changed my definition of success as much as it changed my perception of success. Maybe that's the same thing. But ultimately, I think I realized that at least I would not be happy or satisfied with myself if I didn't feel that I was a really major part of my kids' lives. And maybe it has changed my definition of success. That's a really good question. It's the first time anyone has asked me that. I think that my definition of success has changed to where it is now, if you are successful, it means that you are happy and satisfied and fulfilled. Whereas I think I used to define success strictly by how rich are you, how famous are you. And now I still want to be rich, and I still want to be famous, and I am a little rich, and I am a little famous, but I wouldn't want to be much more rich and much more famous if it meant that I would not be able to pick my kids up from school 1 or 2 days a week, which I do, if it meant that I could not take my daughter to her ballet recitals and that I couldn't take my son Stevie to soccer. I would not trade that for more money. So to me, yes, I guess my definition of success has changed.
And you wouldn't want to be the kind of guy who defines success in such a way that, as you point out in one story in the book, he goes to his 4-year-old's t-ball game and yells at him because he didn't do enough to win.
It's really startling, and that story actually, I pieced together a lot of events in which I've seen that happen over the years, and I've seen it happen. I have nephews who are a little older than my kids, so I've been going to little kids' sporting events for a long time, and I'm astonished at the way some of the parents behave. And so the piece that I wrote in the book about that was the idea of it is that you should be asking your kids if they had a good time before you should be asking them if they won or they lost. And I think you should be doing that with kids up to and including their high school sports. And we just take winning and losing in sports far too seriously when it comes to little kids these days. But yes, I can't believe sometimes what I see. I can't believe sometimes the way I see the parents behaving towards the referees at sporting events. I mean, these are like volunteer referees, people who have, other jobs in the community, and here they are giving of their time for, who knows, someone's buying them lunch to come out and umpire a t-ball game. And here's some dad is yelling at the umpire. It's mind-boggling to me. I don't understand.
And contrary to what those parents might think, the other team has not paid him $10 under the table to throw the game in favor of that team.
That's I would imagine not. You never know. But if so, we may have an expose.
Mike Greenberg will be 58 later this summer. You can hear his podcast, Greenie. Now, you can get your copy of Why My Wife Thinks I'm an Idiot by Mike Greenberg by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also find my 1993 conversation with the great Roy Firestone.
And after a while, I forgot who I was talking to, like the 35th President of the United States. It felt like I was talking to my dad about baseball. Mookie Wilson and Dykstra. You can't platoon those two. You got to have them take their swings.
And my 2000 conversation with TV's Warner Wolf.
It was time for the tape to come up, and I gave the normal intro. No tape. 3 times I tried it, no tape. Finally, I said to the director, "Hey, Ernie, let's go to the videotape." Boom, he rolled it.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, as we get ready to celebrate Mother's Day, let's talk to a famous mother. My 1989 conversation with celebrity astrologer, and the mother of Sylvester Stallone, Jackie Stallone.
I have been the astrologer for many, many politicians. It's not an entertaining subject to me. It's something that a person would go to because they really want to know and need to know and hope the hell that you can tell them something.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.